I'm Tony Vander Ark, Dykema Vander Ark, the whole thing. I'm in the English department here, and I had the great gift of a sabbatical this fall. And one of the things I focused on was looking at different tech tools for teaching and learning, and which I compiled partly on a website. I'll show you this website later if you want to take a look at it. Some of what I'm going to talk about is sort of directly from this and detailed there if you want to look for more. But I started really thinking about tools for teachers. The English department has a new iPad Pro I was very excited about. Camtasia, I was going to look at video and all that kind of stuff. And as I started and really sort of got further into the work, I really ended up narrowing down to student tools. And I came up with some criteria for myself. And these were my tech tools tests, because I quickly became absolutely overwhelmed with the number of tools out there, like so many. So this is what I sort of put as my criteria. They had to be free or really close, very cheap, or maybe cheap for the teacher, but free for students. They had to be easy to use, easy to learn, not requiring a whole IT staff to, or me to answer questions. They had to be well designed, and sometimes that conflicted with free. Some of the best, most beautiful tools were expensive, sometimes outrageously expensive, really targeted to business and industry and stuff. And they had to be flexible. They couldn't be sort of single-use tools. They had to be things students could use creatively and in different ways and for different purposes. Which is one thing I don't like about a lot of textbook tools or publisher tools, right? They're sort of locked down and limited and that sort of thing. And I came up with quite a few. I will say a few provisos. One, I have not used all these tools in my classes. I've practiced and experimented and set up 50 accounts to try out all these tools. I'm getting emails like you wouldn't believe. So A, I have not tried all of them in a classroom, but I really did try to curate and sift through a lot of them. And B, I'm not suggesting that you try all of them. I'm kind of hoping that you find one thing that looks sort of intriguing enough to look into some more. So I'm not suggesting you kind of use all these in one class. I'm using a few of them this fall, and I'm going to experiment a bit with them. So there's lots of pros. There's some cons, right? There's some limitations, I think, to the discussion board as the sort of one and only tool for student engagement outside of class, right? And I think the idea of post 3 times this week without a lot of guidance maybe, or without a lot of sort of training in how to do that, for me has not always worked well. And so I've done some experimenting with different things, but really I'm hoping this semester to try some new tools. So let me kind of use that to segue into some of the tools I want to try out, and maybe you'll want to try out too. And I broke them down into some categories. So the first one is under the sort of broad heading of class communication, teacher-student, student-teacher, student-student communication. I found a tool which, well, I'll let them speak for it. This is a 2-minute video. I thought I can't possibly summarize the tool in 2 minutes. I'm going to play the 2-minute video. So here we go.
Piazza, the online Q&A platform, is incredibly easy and completely free for professors, students, and universities. Piazza eliminates redundant emails and creates tremendous engagement between students and instructors. Used by over 30,000 professors and hundreds of thousands of students around the world, Piazza is FERPA compliant and integrates with all major learning management systems. Professors choose to create their classes on Piazza because it has a streamlined and intuitive interface, helps eliminate email inbox clutter, and is a driver of significantly higher student participation. Some of our most helpful features include a wiki-style format, so you and your students can build a single high-quality answer, avoiding dozens of disconnected comments. Customizable polls, enabling you to take a pulse of your class. LaTeX support inline, or through an editor, to easily write code and equations. Code blocking and syntax highlighting for easy code reading. Rich text editing and the ability to upload pictures, embed videos, and share files, which makes it easy to post materials and generate robust discussion. Quick views of updates, unresolved posts, and unanswered questions, so you know exactly where to focus your time. Detailed class statistics that you can view and download anytime, so you can easily track and reward student and TA participation. Students love Piazza because they can get help in minutes, anytime, day or night. They are notified as soon as their question is answered, removing the need to keep checking if they received a response. Professor endorsements encourage students by letting them know that they are on the right track, and, if professors choose, students can ask and answer questions anonymously, which empowers every student, even the shyest ones, to participate. Getting started is easy and takes just 2 minutes. If you run into a question along the way, email or call us. We'd love to hear from you. Piazza, incredibly easy, completely free.
Just in case you missed it the first time. How many of you set up a discussion board forum for like Q&A? I think in the Blackboard training, that's one of the things they strongly suggest. I did that for 2 or 3 years. I don't think a single student used it. But just like my voicemail, I stopped looking, right? And so once in a while, maybe 1 or 2 students did, but I didn't find them for like 3 weeks or a month. Because it wasn't an active sort of part of the class. The questions my students had, they directed to me in email, right? And in my course, that's probably best. But other classes, I could see this as a really useful tool. If you look at their website, which colleges use this tool, there's some pretty big names there. And then it says click subject to view, and there was no English here. It's computer science and engineering and math and science and physics, things where students might really struggle, and in classes of 400 where they might really struggle to contact the professor. So on the one hand, it's a great tool, I think, for large university courses in really difficult subjects. But because it's so easily integrated in Blackboard, because it could, in a sense, it's designed for Q&A. It's sort of, I think, a much better tool than a Blackboard forum for that kind of thing. And because I kind of love this idea of democratizing question answering while still letting the professor go in and say, this is the right answer, or let me tweak that. And you can all tweak the same answer until the professor sort of vouches for it. I don't know, I thought that sounded intriguing. I'm not going to try this semester. Because again, in English, I don't know that it applies as well. I don't need to type mathematical formulas to my students or explain problems. But it seemed very easy. And the integration, it sounds like if you set this up, they say 2 minutes, students will follow a link from Blackboard and automatically be logged in. So it's like their Blackboard login gets them in, and they can use it without any trouble. So I set up a few sample forums in it, but I think for the sake of time, I'll skip those. The video, I think, does a pretty good job. So it's just piazza.com if you're interested in pursuing it or looking at more. The next thing I wanted to talk about is annotation. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this over the last semester. This is an image I grabbed off the web. This is the dream of English teachers, far and wide. If only our students would do this with their books. How many of you have heard a student say, I don't want to write my book, I need to sell it back? A high school colleague of mine several years ago in AP English, I think gave some huge points to his students. If you show me your books and they're just marked up, I'll give you 100 points or something like that, just like bribing them. But the point is, and you've all done this in school, in grad school or whatever, the point is engaging with the material as you're reading it. And looking up words and underlining things you see, repeated patterns and things. And it seems to me the discussion board in some ways can be counterproductive if this is the kind of engagement you want, right? It's great for some things. Read this chapter and do some real reflecting on it. It's not as good if you want to see what students are doing along the way. So I found a couple interesting tools. There's tons of them, but I found a couple interesting tools. The unlikely source is because Genius started as Rap Genius. Has anyone heard of it? This is a brilliant sort of creation from many years ago. It's called Rap Genius. And it was a site where people took song lyrics and annotated them. And it's still very, very much alive and well. You can find pretty much any song you can think of. Some of these are way too inappropriate to click on, but I tried an hour ago. But let me just show you, to get rid of that. Well, here, I'll click on this one, fingers crossed. And anything that's highlighted has an annotation. So you can click on it, and there are notes. Now you might think, really, annotating rap songs? But this is like a huge thing. People unpack lyrics. And you can find American Pie or Beatles songs or anything else on there. Well, more recently, they changed their name from Rap Genius to just Genius. And they've started a Lit Genius site. And here's the Emily Dickinson page at Genius. And if you click on Because I Could Not Stop for Death, it's annotated. And I could click on this line. The carriage may be a hearse, et cetera, et cetera. And people can upvote and downvote and comment and reply and add all kinds of things to it. It's a great, probably cheating tool now that I think of it. Just thought of that now. But you can also do what this teacher did, which is to set up, let's see if it'll open, set up a whole class page. And you can not only link to documents that are up there, but post your own. So you can put all kinds of documents up there and have your students annotate them, which I think has a lot of potential, has some interesting potential. This is public, so it would be hundreds of people annotating, or thousands or tens of thousands. But there are ways to do it privately as well. Another thing you can do, first a word on why. This is just a little thing I clipped from their webpage. Genius makes web discussions smarter and more targeted. We found on average that readers spend 3 times as long on pages with annotations. You almost can't resist looking, right? Like when you see it, like wonder what someone said. And 9 times as long when they're making annotations. And then it went on to talk about levels of engagement. Suitable for everything? No, right? But maybe some things this might really be useful. And I was thinking OER textbooks. I wonder if you could set up an OER textbook to have it annotatable. And those annotations would all kind of stay with the book. But there's one more way you can do this, which I found really interesting. So 1, you can find content already posted. 2, you can set up your own account. It's very, very easy. And then this is quite interesting. If you add this to any URL, almost any, not any, almost any, it becomes annotatable. So let me just show you an example. If I click on this link and I scroll down, I could highlight something. Sorry, hold on a minute. And it clips the quote, and then I can type whatever I want. And you can have students do this to articles and that sort of thing. And you could have them look up vocabulary words and type the definition or something like that. You could have them look up historical references or allusions or something like that. And those stick with the document so that anyone with it, and you can see this little thing up here in the corner of my screen. I don't know if you can see that. If you're logged into Genius, any web page you go to, you'll be able to see those. So they have one that's all about the news. They're sort of annotating the news. So like the president gives a State of the Union address, and instantly all these people are annotating it, commenting and that sort of thing. And then the other nice thing about this tool, and the next one I'll show you, is that students can compile all their comments, wherever they were, into one document. So they could really reflect on what they've done over a semester, that sort of thing. And that's just by adding that to a URL. It doesn't work on everything. I tried it on a few things, and it said, we're not ready on this site yet, or something. And then there's one more to consider, which is very similar, but has a bit more of a educational focus. It might not have the sort of cool factor as Genius, but it is a little more focused on educational uses. And they actually have on their website this really helpful article. This guy used to work for Genius and then came over here because he wanted something that was a little more private and closed and focused on education. And they have this list of 10 ways you can use annotation, things like rhetorical analysis, close reading. The teacher could annotate something and then give it to students, if you want to provide background knowledge and that sort of thing. So to me, very intriguing, very interesting kind of possibilities there. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is commenting in an app or a tool called Disqus, which I constantly call Discus, and I think everybody does, but it's Disqus. It's pronounced Disqus. So I just took a quick screenshot of one of my forums from Blackboard a few years ago, and then just a screenshot from Facebook, a Guardian article on Facebook. And I noted that there were 444 comments, and there are 18 replies to this comment and 35 replies to this comment. And I was thinking about the differences, right, and the pros and cons of each of these. This one was early in my career with Blackboard, and I obviously neglected to say you need to respond to someone or you need to engage in discussion and conversation. And this is a lame simulation of a discussion, right? I'm fairly certain probably nobody read anybody else's. They just posted their thoughts. It's a journal or it's a response or something like that. Nobody replied to anybody, right? Because I didn't make them or tell them or train them how to do that. But even when I do, I sort of struggled with that one. This is altogether different, right? And this is what our students sort of are living and breathing these days. Now, if I put up a Padlet and said, pros and cons of this kind of commenting, I'm guessing you'd have some cons, right? This is prone to nastiness and meanness and pettiness and politics and all of the above, right? So I'm not suggesting that suddenly we just put everybody on Facebook and say, do all your homework on Facebook. Some teachers are using Facebook, maybe some of you. I can't go there, but I can't do that. But there's some value, I think. But when I think about what kinds of discussion I have in class, I think I don't always have one kind of discussion, right? Sometimes it's private writing. Sometimes it's talk to your neighbor. Sometimes it's free for all, like throw out ideas. And this forum seems to me really well suited to throw out ideas and try to develop them and pick up someone else's idea and run with it, much more than sometimes the discussion board, in my view. So let me show you a couple interesting tool, or one interesting tool at least. This is from the Disqus page. This is how widely used it is. 17 billion monthly users or monthly views of Disqus, 50 million monthly comments. It's on Rolling Stone, People, The Atlantic, TMZ. It's in 191 countries. Anybody know how many countries there are? I Googled it. How many? 195 total. So it's sort of everywhere. I wonder which 4 it's not in, but North Korea, maybe? China. So impressive, right? It's this widely used tool. And another thing I kind of kept in mind when I looked for tools was, are these tools students are going to use in the real world, right? Are these tools that other people are actually using? And this one obviously is, right? This is at the Atlantic Monthly. It's a little bit old, but I picked it because Ta-Nehisi Coates came here a few years ago. I love his writing. I love his thinking. He blogs and writes all the time. And he was the top commenter at the Atlantic Monthly by far, because he responds to all these people. But if your students sign in to Disqus in about 10 seconds, they can sign in with like their Facebook login or Gmail login, they could correspond with Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? They could comment on any article on the Atlantic Monthly. Now that might not be a great thing, but it could be. And to me, this is not the same kind of discussion as you usually see on Facebook, right? I mean, there's some really, even on Facebook, some really thoughtful, engaged discussion going on in comments. New York Times comments I sometimes like more than the articles, right? There's some incredible thinking going on. So that's one way. Now that's very public. I would never do it with K-12 students, but some of your college students, this might be worth experimenting with. The other thing you can do with Disqus is put it on a website. And I know that half of you are like, I don't have a website, I don't want a website. Maybe all of you are thinking that. But let me make a brief pitch. I thought it was at least worth throwing out there. because it's integratable with sort of any of these blogging and website companies, except Google Sites, which I'm going to talk about later. And it really does, it really is sort of loadable, installable quite easily. So I set up my own Wix site that I'm kind of experimenting with. And let me just show you what this would look like. Here's my site under construction. I'll have a little tab for each class. Here's an example of how I might use Discuss. I put some directions. I said, OK, we watched this in class. I took the video from TED. I took the transcript from TED. And they can read the transcript while they watch it again. And then I said, while you're watching, find a line you want to comment on. Copy the line. And when you're done, comment. And this is just I set up an account, Prof. Vander Ark account, and loaded this really easily. And I could have my own sort of comment Facebook kind of feed here, just like that. Now it's not integrated into Blackboard, and I'd have to check who posted and all that. But in some cases, maybe I'd say, I don't care. I'm not going to check every one. At the end of the semester, print off all your comments, right? Compile them all with Discuss. Show me what you did, and write an essay about it or something. So to me, I thought that was a useful tool in addition to something like annotation that maybe adds features Discussion Board doesn't have. It's not that you couldn't do something like this.
Why couldn't you just do that in this?
You certainly could. There's overlap. I think students might take to the commenting feature because it's so easy to have replies under replies, to sort of come back to something. I find the discussion board sort of clunky. You can't see what anyone wrote. You have to open them up, click, click, click. Whereas this, they're familiar with. You'd have to train them, right, to post in a different way than they post on Facebook. But so that's commenting. And then I want to talk a little bit about collaboration. And a lot of these tools kind of overlap in their uses and that sort of thing. But and the first one is Padlet, which you used twice already. I won't open our discussion. So here's Padlet's page. It says easy and intuitive. Everything you need, nothing you don't. If only life were like that. Let me just ask, did you find it fairly easy and intuitive? How many did? Any technical troubles were quickly resolved, right? It's not that difficult. About the only thing I see students do is put their whole comment under the name part, and it's kind of big and bold, and that's fine, like here, right, which is fine. But if you tell them, put your name first and then comment or whatever. So what I like about it, again, it's easy. It's free. What I do is, what I've done is set up an instructor's account for I think $45 a year. It's $5 a month or $45 a year. And then it's still free for my students, but it's sort of more enclosed. So that has some extra features. But you can also just use Padlet.com. It says here also, perfecting the art of collaboration. You can invite others. There's no sign up required to invite others. You can work with unlimited contributors. You can give read-only, writing, moderator, or admin access. So you can have students you can post things for students, really kind of simply. On a snow day a few years ago, I used Padlet to sort of quickly kind of create a little mini lesson lecture thing. And they couldn't comment on it. It was just kind of delivering info. But you can also, of course, students can make them. And I think there's a lot of potential there. Let me just show you a few examples I've used. This was a change.org petition. I've used it several times, really fascinating. A few years ago, a student petitioned Dr. Juan Olivares online. It got 100,000 signers, and they did something about it too. But I said, okay, read this through and do rhetorical analysis. Look for logical arguments, emotional appeals, that sort of thing. And then both sides of this sort of filled up with student comments. Another quick example, I did a survey for students about their media use. And I've done it for many semesters, so I have like 500 and some respondents. And then I just took those, put them on here and said, respond, what do you think? Comment on one of these. And students had a sort of different kind of discussion. And then another thing that Padlet just recently added is comments. So if you didn't want to use discuss or something like that, they just added this feature that you can turn on or off. And so I threw this up yesterday and put a New York Times article, just put the URL and it will load the article. So read this article and then respond, but you can have them respond to each other and get into conversations in a sort of less formal way, but I think useful way. So you can organize it so that all posts are kind of laid out in a grid. If you don't like the free form thing, it gets kind of messy. You can have them kind of scroll almost like a blog. Or there's a couple other formats too. So, and then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about, let me say this first. How could you use it? I think it's great for process work, sort of accumulating stuff, pulling in resources. I think for my students doing research papers, this could be a great kind of growing research portfolio because you can put in URLs, you can put in PDFs, you can put in videos, you can put in almost any kind of file. As well as things like poster presentations in the sciences. You could say, okay, use this instead. Have a kind of you can have links out to your sources if you want. And very easily collaborative as well. One student can do it, or many can do it at once. So, and then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about Google Apps. Actually, maybe what we can do first is check out this session survey to see how many of you already use Google Apps. This is kind of a cool thing. If you haven't used Google Forms, I wanted to use this as an example. Very easy to set up. You've already filled out many of these at CC, I'm sure. But also very flexible in how you can use them. So if you click on responses here are your responses. Are you interested? Most of you, yes, quite a bit. No, not really's. OK. How many of you use the discussion board? About half of you regularly, a quarter occasionally, and a quarter no. OK. Assignments, journals, wikis, all right. Very interesting. Half and half on publisher tools. And this is the one I was interested in. OK, so really not that many of you use Google Apps. OK. How many have heard about them already today? OK, because I know Gary Ebels talked about them, maybe a few other people. I'm going to skim through a few features and then talk about just one of them that nobody's talked about yet, really. And if you want to know more, IT has got a page with resources, and they're going to do all kinds of sessions. I'll back up enough just to say this. A year ago or so, or for the last many years, I knew about Google Docs. I wasn't a huge fan, and I always used Microsoft Word. And in my sabbatical, I used nothing but Google Docs. I took 400 pages of notes in Google Docs. And I have probably 60 documents and files and PDFs, and it's all loaded on Google Drive. And I have links between them. Check out where I talked about this on another document, And I find it so useful. I think it's a really polished tool, and it's free, and it's something your students already have. So let me just talk about a couple of them quick. I'll skip over Forms right now. Docs and Drive. Google Docs is, well, I should back up a second and say all of your students have them. They all have a Google account through school. They have access to huge amounts of storage, and they can use all these apps for free. So the couple nice things about Google Docs, it saves every time you hit a key, basically. So no more my computer crashed and I lost everything. It's out there. Like you can say, here's my computer, log in, where's your paper? Right? I left it at home. No, it's on their phone. They can get it on their phone. So that's really nice. In fact, I got out of the habit of saving, and now I'm using Word again a little bit. I'm like, ooh, I got to save before it crashes. Sharing and collaborating is pretty much what Google, the biggest selling point has always been for Google. In fact, now Microsoft Word is copying this, and a lot of others are really getting in on this sharing and collaborating in the cloud game. Everybody's selling that point. Google has always been really big on that. It's so easy, and students do not need to upload documents and then download them and then comment and then upload them again to Blackboard. You just share a URL, and they can open it, do whatever they want, comment. You can have 10 students working on the same document. My son's in 10th grade. This is just second nature to him. He's working on documents while 3 other kids are just working on the same document. And that's just totally what K-12 students are doing now. And then there's a commenting feature where you can give teacher feedback or peer feedback. Google Drive is basically just a storage thing. How many use Dropbox? Dropbox is awesome, but I realized I stopped using it because I just put everything in Drive now. I kind of have replaced it with Drive. And this one eliminates the I left my flash drive at home, because all of their documents and all of their files in Drive are accessible from any computer. With the caveat that if they don't have good internet at home, you're kind of in, that's another subject, but you do kind of need to be connected. You can share entire folders. The nice thing here is I could set up a folder in Google Drive for course documents and share it at the beginning with students. Whoever has the link can open this and use these. And then anything I put in that folder is shared with them automatically. Students, likewise, I'm going to have my students set up a portfolio folder and share it with me at the beginning. And anything they put in it, I can see. They don't have to try to get it to me or submit it to me or whatever. Now, I hope it will work as smoothly as I think it will. But and then it works seamlessly with Google Sites. And I want to talk about that one just a little bit. That's kind of the new one. I wanted to save just a few minutes to talk about this, and then I'll try to quit with a few minutes left. But Google Sites has been around forever, and it is clunky and ugly. And I tried to make a few websites over the years, and I was like, this is ridiculously bad. Well, everybody knew that, and they've been working on it. And I went to a conference last summer, and they said, we're reinventing it. We're building it from the ground up. And so now there's a different Google Sites. The old one still exists, but this new one exists. And I was so excited. All my sabbatical, I was watching for it. Is it out yet? Is it out yet? Is it out yet? And finally, in like late November or something, all of a sudden it shows up. And I kind of hate it. It's extremely limiting. And if you're into graphic design like me, it's maddeningly unmodifiable. It's so limited. However, the upside, and this is where maybe students come in, it's drop dead easy to learn. You don't need to know any design ability. I mean, you can still make an uglier or a better looking one, but you don't need to know a whole lot about that. You don't need to know any kind of web design languages or HTML. And in fact, you can't do anything with HTML, which is what actual people who love tech hate about it. You can't change any of that. And it's fully integrated with Google Apps. And I want to show you just briefly. The reason for this, why they make it that way, is in part to make it super easy. They're filling a niche in the market. Like anybody can put up a website. But in part because it's mobile friendly. And I think of how many of our students access Blackboard and access all their stuff on mobile, right? Which seems ridiculous to me. I can't imagine. But Google made it this way so you couldn't do anything that would look terrible or wouldn't work when you put it on mobile. And so that's really the reason for the limitations. Let me just show you quickly, because I think it has potential for teachers, but especially for students. If you want students to sort of be working on the web or kind of creating a website that's public or a website that's private, but that's a great way to just sort of display their final work, this could be worth knowing about. So here's the one I set up for today. And I'll give you the link if you want to look at it. And I set up a page for the survey. I set up a page for the slides, so if you want to look at any of those. I set up a page for sources if you want to go to any of these things. But here's how I would set up a new one. Sitesgoogle.com will bring you to the old sites. /new will bring you to the new one. And I could set up a complete online published website in probably 2 minutes. 5 with some content in it. So I'll show you how. So I just click the plus. Your page title. I have very few options here, right? So what should we call this? Rachel, thinking of you. We'll call it Tigers. Or maybe Tigers. World's
greatest cat.
World's greatest cat?
Yeah, cats.
Oh, I didn't mean to do all caps, but we'll do that. Or question mark. Is it a research project? Okay. Now, for this formatting, I started looking like, oh, how do I change the color? How do I change the size? How do I? All I can do is make it normal text, or a title, or a heading, or a subheading. That's it. And as a graphic design person, I'm just like, come on, I can't stand this. However, and then the header can only be large, banner, or title only. That's it. Now there are 6 different page themes you can play around with. I found all of them sort of equally not quite good enough, but but you can do some things. There's a few options. Okay, here's our site. What do I want to put on it? Well, you only have a few choices here. You can insert text, so I could insert text. Here's my report on tigers. I love tigers, etc.
The gas station.
Yeah. Oh, if I had it up, I would put that up. Yeah. I can embed a URL. I can put images. I can search the web for tigers, and it will find me some tiger pictures. I can make it bigger. I can move it over here. You notice the grid. You can't change the grid, but you can make it centered. You can make it bigger, smaller. And then this little button scales it. Tigers. I kind of want the picture up here. I could do that. I could do this, and then make it bigger again. I could put it above the headline, etc. There's my tiger report. I can upload things, I can add all the text I want. I could make the text in columns, and then have another text box that I just want to say, okay, this goes up here, and that should be the same size as that column, etc. Right? But the real cool thing, if your students are doing all their work on Google Drive, is that here's all of their Google stuff. And Google, I don't know if you know, owns YouTube. So you could say, I want a YouTube video on tigers. Ooh, tiger might not be right. Tigers. Let's see. Yeah, that one looks good. I'll select that. I have a video in my website that will play just like it would on YouTube. I can put in a map. I could search John Ball Park Zoo, and it will zoom in, and I can say select, and I have a map to John Ball Park Zoo. I could put in other things. And then down here is Google Docs and your Drive. So if I want to put something from Drive, or Docs, let's say, I just select it, and all of my stuff is there. And so I could put in, let's say, let me go to here, Learning Day. I've got some sample files. So I could put in an image. I could put in a survey, a Google survey, or I have to insert. I could put this on the website and make it live. One of the cool things is if I make any change in my Google file, it's instantly changed online. Don't have to go to the web at all. No changes there. And then I click Publish. And the first time it asked me to give it a name. I could give it any kind of ending to the URL. And you can choose to publish it only to students, like to a link, or to the whole World Wide Web. If you're in a K-12 school, there's some other cool options. And if I click Publish, it's out there. It's live. It's a website. It's clickable and workable and all the rest. So I think it's pretty cool for students if you're interested in having them actually get a real audience for their work. A scientific poster presentation or a paper or a sort of mini magazine or a group project or something like that. This is not that difficult to work, to learn, right? And because another thing they could do is simply, and I'm thinking about just doing this, set up a page for papers, insert, and then from their docs, they can just They can just insert their papers. And what's kind of cool is that if I publish this, and this were a 10-page paper, I can read it right there and scroll down in it. I could also click and open it. And if they had shared it with me, I could open it and comment on it and all the rest. So some kind of cool features. I think it's kind of a new option for the whole website thing. I wanted to save a couple minutes. Questions, thoughts, Susan?
I just have a question about, I mean, if you use like Google Sites for a project, can you like somehow embed that in Blackboard? I mean, so they don't have to have like the URL that they're going to use.
You mean as far as like letting you open it or sharing it with others, or?
Yeah, I mean, like, so you want them to do like these group presentations using that
Right.
tool. Is there something that I can put in Blackboard so that they can go and
You could certainly,
do websites or whatever?
to get started on a website, you mean?
Yeah, or to
Yeah.
whatever, do their presentation.
I mean, two things come to mind. One is if you wanted them to start a site, if you put sites.google.com/new, and they were logged into Gmail, that would open their sites page. And if they didn't have any of them, they just click the plus and they could start a site. You know, as far as sharing them, that's a great use for something like forms, where you could do a single question, right? Copy and paste your URL here, or put your name here and your URL of your website, and you can have a spreadsheet of all their URLs. And you could say test it first before you submit it. So there's no copying and pasting of that or typing of that. And they can share the website directly with you. So, Nora.
Can you put Discuss into that website?
So that's one of the problems. one of the downsides of Google with this kind of lockdown thing is you can't do that. And even on the old Google sites, you had a little more flexibility with what you could add. You could mess with HTML and stuff. This is not a good one for that. I will say you can set up a Wix website pretty quickly. It's a little more difficult, but pretty quickly. Here is, if you're interested at all, here is the short version if you wanted to look at this presentation. And here is a short version of a link to this website I made. This has got these tools and a whole bunch of others that is just live now. In fact, the only people who I've checked the analytics, the only people who have visited are a bunch of people in Russia. A little scary. Yeah, like 30 views and all over Russia. I don't know what that's about, but
Really?
it's troubling. I do know what that's about, yeah. So thank you all. I think we got 2 minutes left. If you have questions, you can come up and ask, but thanks for coming.